Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Coach Henry here on the Positive Traction Podcast. Thankful and for your support along this journey. Today, I have Mr. Chris. Him and I have known each other, I would say, a little shy of a decade.
Yeah.
We met through the financial world of banking. He met me in one of the transitional parts of my life and was a pivotal point of believing in me, believing my ability, spoke some great things, guided me a lot in the financial sense of the banking world. So I'm excited for you guys to get to know Chris and different levels of not only what he does and what he can do, but also his story. So with that being said, Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Awesome, Henry. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate being a part of this and a big believer in what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. So, for the sake of those that don't, they like my vagueness of things, can you put a little bit more content of banking, a
Yeah.
little bit about your history that kind of gives a little bit of element to what you do for a living in the sense of the greater scope of things in the banking world?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the past probably decade and a half, been a banker in the traditional sense. Started off in consumer banking, and I've always had an affinity and a passion for entrepreneurship. So really gravitated towards that. I was always somebody who would get bored quickly with things, but in the banking industry, you may work with 5 or 10 doctors, manufacturers, lawyers, but none of them has the same story, and none of them get to the finish line the same way, or even have the same aspirations afterwards. So it became this like really dynamic job that I fell in love with. And I never fell in love with banking. It was always more of a platform to kind of work with entrepreneurs and help them solve problems and help them achieve their goals and whatever small part of that I could play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am one of those recipients, so thank you, and I appreciate that.
Take no credit.
You should take a lot of credit for that. But I think one of the things about why I wanted you on the show, Chris, is because you're dealing with people's unfortunately first love in many cases, which is money. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you are advising, supporting, helping create solutions. One of the things I admired about you a lot was even if it wasn't the institution that you can do for them,
Mm-hmm.
you still were able to like guide people to almost a competitor, if you will. But that says a lot about your character and about who you are. So I think it'd be great. Why don't we start with, I like to call it the 3 H's, which is humbleness, hindrance, and hungry. Let's talk about the hindrance first, which
Mm-hmm.
is what are some of the challenges that have come your way in the last decade of banking and financial services for you personally that has been a struggle for you, that have ultimately led to better things. But let's take you there because I think people that are listening on this, watching this, that are stuck in that world, it doesn't have to be money or financial, but they're stuck in something that is like, hey, you know, if Chris can do it and he's inspirational to do more, then let's talk about that hindrance for you that led you
Yeah.
to move around a
Yeah.
little bit.
Absolutely. Great question. Great question. I'm glad we're starting with hindrance. When I first got into banking, I'll say like my first 2 or 3 weeks on the job, I would have this manager who would check in with me in the morning, 8:30 before the branch even opened. And they would say, what do you have for appointments today? And then they would check in on me at noon before lunch and say, hey, how'd your morning appointments go? What do you have going on after lunch? And then at the end of the day, they would check in with you and say, hey, how many accounts did you open? How many credit cards? Things like this. And it would be like, what do you have scheduled for the next day? And to me, it was like the job wanted you to push widgets and like completely disregard what it is that the client needs, and what problems you're solving for them. And it got to the point where I'm like, I can't do this. I can either see people for who they are, have an open, honest conversation, or I can disregard, their story and try to sell them a credit card or say, hey, let's open a new account and things like this. So, I eventually told that manager, I was like, hey, no one wants to have their schedule fuller than me, and more productive than me, but I can't, approach each conversation with, what product don't you have? What product can I sell you? It's like, so I eventually just kind of pushed the keyboard aside and started talking to people and kind of understanding their journey and where they're at in their business life cycle and everything or in their life. And like, that's what I really loved about it. So I
Yeah.
saw that as a hindrance at the beginning. This company, one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. So obviously they're doing a lot of things right, but it wasn't authentic to me. You know,
Right.
it wasn't the right path for me. And I saw like myself getting burned out like a few weeks into it. And I think I put myself in a position where it's like, if I take care of my clients and do what's right for them, I won't have to worry about these goals and these metrics and these KPIs that my company sets forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think you put it in a great way, and I definitely agree. Look, we understand they do a lot of things right, or they wouldn't be the mega empire they are.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
But I think that when you get to that point, I think all companies, but let alone someone like that, imagine if they took an elite group, someone like with your heart and passion, and said, hey, we're good, we get enough numbers, but what if we go back a little old school and say, hey, what does Henry need for his business? And if it happened to be a credit card or this or this or this or this, so be it. But it's coming from a place of authenticity, right? And I think that's what's missed. But that also was a hindrance. You learned to see the good in it, and that took you ultimately. You decided to move on to other ventures that have allowed you to apply more of those principles. So now the second part of the hindrance, just because again, what is a step if someone right now listening or watching this is saying, look, I get a steady paycheck and all the boxes are checked, but I'm not looking forward to going to work. How does that work in your mind? Someone that can change it up but still be responsible, because you had to make that decision. So without saying too much about your journey, what is a step that helped you take that hindrance to a better height?
I would say find your passion within it, whatever it is. Like, obviously, if you're bussing tables or you're working at a bank or you got a white collar job, a blue collar job, whatever it might be, you're driving Uber, like your passion is probably not going to be the job itself. But same thing, if you're driving Uber and you have, a great conversation and that really fuels you throughout the day and you get to hear someone else's passions or someone else's successes and everything, and you get to kind of hear that story and maybe you can take a little nugget from that and amplify the next conversation that you're having.
Yeah,
I think that's a good place to start.
absolutely. I love that. That's great.
I think a lot of people get caught up in the whole comparing, like I'm not where I want to be or I'm not where that person's at, and I'm a big believer in comparison is a thief of joy.
Yeah,
And it just steals away from, because you look at like, oh, I'm not where I want to be, but then you were in the dream position of someone else, starting off, or maybe at a stage in their life where they kind of committed too long to a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And they kind of gave up on their passions and stuff. So
I love that, Chris. That's a great answer. And, I take that because, there's such a great part of verses that I read is to be content and joyful in all, right? Because even in the hindrance, there's joy there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because hey,
Depends
you
on
have a
how you
job.
look at it,
It's all how you look at it. Like you said, if you're an Uber driver, great. You have freedom. You have a schedule you can adjust. There's so many great perks with that.
Yeah.
But none of that is good if you're coming at it from a bad perspective of your eyes, right? And I think that's what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. You got to have the right perspective in it and everything. And it's like, it's not for you right now, or it's not your turn, or it's not your time. And you just got to be patient and kind of just build your foundation and get ready for when the opportunity strikes.
Yeah, I love that. That's great input. And that's what I love about the show is getting people's real life, and because someone's going to click with something. Might be someone talking about the restaurant business, banking business, being an athlete. All of us need some kind of tangible. That goes into now, let's go into hungry. And I say hunger because you need to have a hunger in order to achieve for yourself, for your family. So what has been a hunger trigger for you that has kept you very much aware that you have to make it work?
I mean, it should be a hunger trigger for everybody that our time on this earth is finite and there's only one go round. I mean, if that doesn't make you hungry, I don't know what will.
Right. So on that, let's unpack that, because I agree with you, but we both know there's a lot of people that don't even apply that.
Sure. Yeah.
So what would think is a practical step that somebody can unpack that, that, your younger self talking to yourself, you might advise on that?
I mean, the answer is right in I guess, just pulling yourself back into the finiteness of what this world is for us individually and everything. And like, just kind of keeping that at the not at the forefront. It's hard to kind of operate, with thinking like, there's finiteness to everything, but just living in the moment, being in the moment. And, like there's there's one day of today. There's one
Right.
moment of this. There's, one experience and making the most out of that. Yeah. And
So
I would say that.
I love that. So in your hunger then,
Hmm.
and I get it, look, we have one go around,
Yeah.
right? However many days they say you have and all that. And that's assuming that we make it to the 80s and all that
Sure. Yeah.
in life. So I think for me, within that hunger has always come a relevancy of there's no retreat, no surrender,
Hmm.
right? Now
Yeah.
sometimes we have to retreat in the sense, not to be an oxymoron or be contradictory, but retreating, I would say more of a readjustment, not a full retreat, right?
Yeah.
Because wisdom will allow us, hey, it's like going down a road and the map says go one way, and then wait a minute, it's not updated. In the last 20 minutes, there's a major car accident. We're gonna have to detour. It wasn't updated, so sometimes we have to readjust a lot.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
how do you find yourself in a practical way where you're trying to take that hunger, take care of your family, make the best turn around the sun, as you say,
Yeah.
count. But how do you come up with a readjustment or push through something? Because oftentimes we're at a crossroad. Where is this something, even when you left the first major organization,
Sure.
is this me being like, I just need to suck it up and push through? Or is this me saying it had a great purpose, great season, time to move on? How does that work for you?
Lots to unpack there. But I would say, like, looking at every successful entrepreneur that I know, and I know their story and everything, their victories are a collection of losses. And like, it's the mentality of like you either win or you learn, but it's all perpetual. Like you're taking whatever it is, that win or that lesson into the next thing.
Mm.
But it's kind of built into the system of, there's no, I don't lose and give up or
Right.
anything. It's like you learn, you move on, or you win, and you carry that victory into the next week or the next game.
Mm.
And not to get, I guess, too deep or anything like that, but you look at like great white sharks and, in the ocean, and you kind of see their battle scars. Like they're this
Yeah.
apex predator and everything,
Yeah.
but there's very few that get to a ripe old age for a shark and everything that don't have these battle scars and they're not battle tested and everything. So
Yeah, you're
that's a
so
great,
right.
yeah,
That. Listen, that's a great example because you've seen sharks and they all have battle wounds. I mean, so
the ones that are still around, yeah,
right. That means they got. So I love that. So I'm gonna translate that into the grit of life. Right. You gotta push through. So I love that. Okay. So now, Chris, and thank you for sharing some great things on that. How about your humbleness? Through you deal and dealt and do with a lot of high net worth people that money is not an issue, moving millions around sometimes and all kinds of stuff. So you being in this world, how do you find yourself to stay humble, to be a good husband, to be a good father? What keeps you grounded?
That's a great question. I'm still working at being good and great at all those things, but I think what helps me the most is like taking myself out of the equation, and if it's like, dealing with somebody, I put their concerns, their goals ahead of mine. And again, it goes back to like that third week on the job where, I can either look out for myself and probably not build good relationships and everything, or I can take care of my clients, my connections, my friends, and then kind of carry that throughout life and
Yeah.
just be like, hey, Chris helped me do this, or Chris connected me with this person and that worked out great, and kind of elevating your value and people's perspective. So that's kind of how I stay humble, I would guess. Yeah.
Okay, so and I love that, and I get that. Again, I'm a recipient of that in many ways with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now let's get into this part.
Hmm.
What is whether it was business or personal, a moment for you that was so difficult that it almost crumbled you or did crumble you? And I'll give you an example in my world
Sure.
to give you a
Yeah,
moment
yeah.
because I know it's a powerful question. One of the moments came for me in when I had my first bankruptcy. Again, I didn't have mentors. I didn't know to get a mentor. I didn't know a lot about a lot, right? So, but I'll never forget. In this case, my attitude became almost. I I don't. I sabotaged myself.
Mm.
And I realized because I was like 27 years old, I was managing all this money because I thought money coming in, but it really should have been into a corporate account or
Mm-hmm.
LLC. I,
Sure.
I, I
Yeah.
was a sole proprietor. I didn't know that they were different,
Yeah, it's a
right?
great point. Yeah.
So I just was living a life because I'd see, oh, there's money in the account, but there was more money that was supposed to go out. I just
And
didn't.
your silent business partner, the IRS.
Yes,
Yeah.
they quickly showed up to the party that I didn't know I was throwing the wrong way.
Yep.
So learned a lot, obviously, through that. But what was pivotal for me in that was a loss of realization that that's not my money, that's not my life,
Mm-hmm.
and that you need to really surround yourself with great people. So that was a very tough lesson for me
Sure.
because it wasn't like, oh, Henry, you meant well. It's like, Henry, you've lost it all. You got a BK, but there's a $1 million bankruptcy case.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about this was 18 years ago. Okay, so still a lot of money now. But that was a lot of money back then.
Sure.
And at 27, how did I rack that up? Now it wasn't people go, well, yeah, how did you? Well, it was leases that were I had signed on leases, so the value of that was a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
You know, but you break them, so it wasn't like it was I went and charged up credit cards. It was more like a bunch of leases,
Yeah.
things of that nature. But that was a pivotal point for me to go like, wow, life is hard, and so I had to really kind of pick up from there.
Mm-hmm.
But what was a point for you in your version of that you had to kind of like, as they say, flight or feast, that you can go, that was significant. It didn't have to be as drastic because you come from the money world in the sense of that. I didn't come from that world. So that was my humbling.
Mm-hmm.
What was humbling for you?
Yeah, life will humble you. And there's a lot of times in my life when I've been humbled, and it goes back to you either, stay there or you pick your pieces up like you've done and rebuild and take the lessons and everything. I guess we'll keep it more recent. I would say, again, 12 years into a career at the biggest financial institution in the country. People can Google that and use their deductive reasoning to
Which
figure out
one
what
that
that
is.
is. Yeah, it's still a very active shareholder of the company, but yeah, I mean, I left there and everything, and it was, I think a lot of people, they pack their identity into their employer sometimes.
Yeah, that's good.
And
That's good.
like, even if you're guarded and you don't want to do that, if you're with a company long enough, it becomes part of your identity and
Yeah.
everything. And I think thinking about, like, do people answer my phone because it's Chris calling, or do people answer the phone because it's blank institution and everything? So
yeah.
I left them, had aspirations to, achieve these lofty goals and everything at a super regional bank. And like 6 months into it, through no fault of my own, the bank gets seized. We're one of the 3 banks in the country, March 2023, that the president is on the phone or on the TV one day, Saturday morning, talking about and everything. And, this is the First Republic, the Silvergate, the Silicon Valley Bank, and then our bank, Signature Bank, that are taken over by the feds and everything. And you're like, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
I left the safest institution in the country, pretty much like a government entity at this point.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
So like the safety and security, but I mean, there was kind of a little bit of peace. Luckily, our transition, we were in a bridge bank capacity, which is what happens when you go into receivership and everything with the FDIC. We were there for like a week, and then we got taken over by this other regional bank out of New York. And things were looking up and everything, and then I think less than like 11 months into it, our stock plummets like 80% in a few days, give or take. And I'm like, what the hell? What is my luck? There's 5,000 financial institutions in the country that are FDIC insured, others that are like NCUA, and then other non-bank financial institutions. And I have to pick the one that damn near fails twice in a matter of 11 months. So yeah, I would say if that doesn't humble you, I don't know what. You start thinking like, hey, is it just bad luck here and things like that? But
Well, Chris, I love that you brought that up because, look, like you said, you came from safety, routine, all the things, went to try and find something that matched more your passion for people,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
you did to no fault of your own. That was a part of your story being there that, 0 for 2, if you will. 0 for
Yeah,
2.
pretty much. Yeah.
But that's a great example of you having to not only rely on your faith and your grit, you're like, wow, like,
Yeah.
and again, at any given time, you could have gone back to the safety net.
Sure.
You know, you
Yeah.
obviously left on a good note. You're very sought after in the industry that you're at. So you definitely could have gone, which nobody would have blamed you. They were like, dude, you gave it your shot. Go lick your wounds, regroup, and go from there. But you didn't. You chose to continue the path that you're on. So that is a great example of your humbleness. That definitely humbled you because I remember a couple of things you shared with me. That was not an easy, and the way you found out about these things.
Yeah,
You know, just it wasn't like you know, hey, by the way, guys, we're in trouble. It was like, wait, is that the new bank I just went to?
Yeah,
Like,
literally.
you know,
Yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah.
So in all that, let's get into one layer that you're willing to share. You obviously married 2 beautiful kids. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's a tip? Because obviously, you have a great family, but I think as an inspiration to people that go through scary moments like you just shared, find no matter how good of a person, bills still have to get paid.
Sure. Yeah.
So what's a testament to your marriage that you feel is practical for someone to go, okay, they had to get through it. And, you know, and for young couples that are battled with things like this, what is a secret of yours, if you will?
I would say, well, first of all, I am the recipient of good fortune of being able to marry my best friend, and I think that's step one.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Been married for a decade to my beautiful, inspirational wife. We've known each other going on like 20 years now.
That's awesome. So, for 10 years knowing each other, then
no, 20, almost 20 years knowing each other, and then 10 years married.
Wow, that's awesome.
This year. So step one, marry the greatest person in the world. I take no credit for that.
Right.
She's just incredible. She's supportive. She's obviously given me 2 amazing children and everything. And she's my biggest champion, biggest supporter, biggest critic, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right. She's not afraid to tell you, like, hey, I don't agree.
No, exactly.
And I love that. And Chris, on that, I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Because you don't just need a cheerleader. That's great. That's great. You need someone who's going to say, by the way, Chris, I love you, but that's not a good move or whatever. And I think that's so respectful.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. So she is amazing in every sense of the word. Infinitely grateful to have her by my side and everything.
That's awesome. I love that.
Other than being extremely lucky, man, I don't know if I have any advice there. Yeah.
Well, I take from that as one is it goes back to just marrying your best friend, because it's not just on a lustful thing or the good looking. I mean, that's all great and perks, but it was someone that you can actually sit and talk to.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's your relationship. Best friends, usually someone you could talk to, laugh with, cry with, be real with. I think that's important. So I think the takeaway I got from that was marry your best friend.
I will say too, there's another secret to that. I like growing up, I didn't have like the greatest home life and everything. My mom did an incredible job of being, you know, mom and dad and everything, supporter. And like there's nothing I brought to her that she's like, oh, you can't do that. She's like, oh my God, you're going to be the best at that and everything. But one thing I looked for in a partner in life was like, I wanted them to have a great family foundation, and her family is that. Like, we can hang out and everything. We're good friends. There's never an awkward moment or anything like that. So yeah, she has a wonderful foundation. Her mom and dad have been together for 40 plus years now.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
like
awesome.
they just celebrated their 40th anniversary. So yeah, they're incredible, and they built a good foundation for her and her family and everything. And yeah, I'm honored to be a benefactor of that.
Well, I love that because look, we can't control where we came from, but you and any couple or relationship out there can help somewhat control, if you will, what you do with it from here, right? So, you know, let's say I came from a broken home or a home that wasn't that great. Okay, well, that's fine. So maybe I had to work a little harder.
Yeah.
But now, what can you do with it? Like you said, your mom did the best she can do. But now, with the two of you, you can now kind of create your home for your two kids
Yes.
to kind of do that. And I think that's the beauty. People forget that. Yes, some people might have a leg up or come from a beautiful family, and some come from orphanages or foster programs.
Yeah.
But at some point, we have the opportunity to say, well, what are we going to do with it now? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And every day is that opportunity. What are you
absolutely.
going to do with it? People carry trauma with them through life, and they're 60, 70, 80 years old, and they say things like, oh, I couldn't achieve this because this happened to me, and things like that. And there's some very traumatic things out there, but every day is a chance to
Yeah.
start something
And
new, and
I agree, Chris.
maybe not carry that with you.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the show, a part of what I want to talk about next in this next is really about heart. It is that. Is like we all have reasons we are who we are. And there's no doubt that having a dad that's great makes an impact. Having a mom that's great is impact. But some people didn't grow up with that. Right. But at some point, like we were saying, we have the same day. We all do.
Same 24 hours.
Same
yeah.
24 hours. At some point in life, we are like, okay, my upbringing sucked or my upbringing was great. What am I going to do with it? And that's the responsibility. And I think that's why I want to do, and we're doing what we shared, is a practical tip. Okay, you come from the banking world. That was my worst quality. Managing money was my absolute worst. I used to go to Debtors Anonymous. How people know that, literally. And that, people always joke about cash. I always have cash on me. Don't try to get me because I know how to protect myself. But I always do cash.
Yeah.
But the truth of why I started cash, now I don't share this a whole lot, is because my credit cards used to always get declined because I never had money.
Yeah.
So that was part one. And part two was in Debtors Anonymous, they said, carry what you can spend. If you can't spend it, don't have it.
Yeah.
So I went for a short time. I'll never forget one of my good friends at the time. This was years ago, obviously. And I had no car. I had nothing because
Sure. Yeah.
But I'll never forget, they were dropping me off to one of my meetings. And they go, what do you talk about in there? I go, well, you should come in and check it out, And it was that whole like, hi, I'm Henry, and it's like AA.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the exact words, but it was that. Now, thank God, I'm a quick learner in most cases, and I learn quickly, and God worked quickly in me to be able to learn to respect money.
Yeah.
Right, and that's really what it comes down to, respect money. Because then you go through that. Whether you have a lot of money or a little money, there's always battles, right? But it's cool to see where it's brought me and the amount of people I've been able to help now better with their money, understand their money, and all that good stuff. But that's the same thing you're not talking about is what are you going to do with it now? What are we going to do with our platform? We all have a platform. And that is, first, if you have kids, how do you impact them?
Yes.
Family, how do you impact them? Right? If you're married, how do you impact them? And then next is people you work with, and then the greater community. So I love that you shared that. So on that note, what is something that you feel, and it's a great question I love asking myself, is that you, now looking ahead, Chris, this is where I see you. How does that person, how are you going to speak to Chris 10 years from now? What are you going to say to Chris 10 years? Because we always talk about the past. What would you say to the young Chris? But what are you going to say with the Chris 10 years from now?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't talk to him often, but
Well, you're going to talk to him a lot more because I got big goals for you.
Oh, I appreciate that, Henry. I appreciate your belief in me and everything. I try to focus my mind on the here and now. I subscribe to that, kind of thinking of things you
100%.
did in the past or want to do different. That's not good. And then kind of getting anxious about the future is not good. So I try to stay present as much as I can.
100%. I have a ratio for that. I do 30% future, 60% now, 10% past.
Okay.
That's an episode that I'll share with you at another time.
Okay.
That, one of my
Little teaser
episodes
there,
I
yeah.
spoke.
Little
But
teaser.
the 30% to me isn't about being anxious about the future.
Yeah.
It is, though, forecasting. Some say manifesting. I say praying for.
And
preparing.
Yeah.
But being present very much. Hence, 60% of my life
Without a
is
doubt.
right here.
Yeah.
I'm with you right now, but I got you. You got to plan what time you're going to feed the baby, and so that's more like looking ahead, Chris. In everything you got going on, what would you say to that guy 10 years from now?
Hopefully, I can say congratulations.
There you go.
When
There you go.
You live life the right way and prioritize the right things, and hopefully that's a collection of moments of you living in the presence.
Yep. Beautiful.
But with that, I mean, I think I don't want to say my 9 to 5 days are behind me, but kind of in a transition period now where it's like, I've worked in the finance world and everything for the past 12 years, and I've been a conduit for a collection of successes and stories and everything like that. And it's like, how can I translate that into something more entrepreneurial?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
more to come on that. But I think if I can execute properly and align myself with the right mentors and leaders and partners and things like that, I think we'll be quite successful here in a decade or so.
And I love that, Chris. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question because look, it's being very much the present, but you said it. It's a bunch of bits and pieces of being in the present that will lead to a greater future.
Exactly.
It's the habits that you lead today, right? That's what's going to come up to the better you. And I love how you said it. 10 years from now, the first thing you say is congratulations.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say to add to that for me is thank you, Henry, for not giving up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Henry, for believing in yourself.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't believe in yourself, then Shane would have a hard time believing in you.
Sure.
Because you know, at the end of the day, we're called that. So awesome. Well, you shared some great things. I wanted now you get a chance to ask me a question.
Oh, good.
Good. Oh no,
Man.
because I love all that you shared, and as I do these episodes, before as you're thinking about my question, I truly love hearing people's stories, their rawness, their humbleness, their hindrance, their hunger. So thank you for being on the show, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And again, appreciate your platform and what you're doing for people across the country.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So
I gotta try to think of a question that nobody has asked you or you haven't asked yourself.
Oh, you're getting deep.
Any hints? I don't know if I'm gonna be able to achieve that. Oof.
It's all right. It's all right. I can't help you on this one.
You guys can edit this part here. But, let's see. I guess what do you want your tombstone to read? You know, if it's a lengthy 1,000 character, you don't have to go that long into it, but there's space, you know, because anybody in life who achieves greatness, you know, sometimes they have a big headstone. So when that day comes for you, and it's inevitably coming for all of us, what do you want that to read? Like the impact that you've made on people, what you achieve. I mean, money is going to be gone. It's of no use to you at that point.
Yeah.
But what do you want your impact on this world to have been? And lasting impact.
Yeah. Yes.
Even
That's
after you're
that's
gone.
so for the record, you accomplished what you wanted.
Okay, good.
No one's ever asked me that question.
Okay.
It's a great question. And I believe I have an answer that's authentic and real. And I don't need 1,000 words. I believe that what I'll have on my tombstone will be, it'll be short. It'll be, you did good, my son. That's it.
Awesome, man.
And I'll tell you what that means. That's God telling me that I did good for his kingdom.
That's awesome.
That I truly lived every life to the fullest. Broke, been there. Stupid, been there. All kinds of stuff. But my mom said this to me a long time ago. You know, son, you have more persistence than anyone I've ever known. And she never speaks to me like that. She's a great mama, but she wasn't like a business, you know, she didn't do a lot of life skills in that aspect for me.
Yeah.
But I love your question because to me, it keeps me in check to each day. You know, I try not to let the small things sweat.
Yeah.
Because all we need is that one phone call that really does matter to put things in perspective.
Without a doubt.
So to me, I try to keep that attitude, and through the grace of God, I keep that attitude pretty good, so I can enjoy life no matter how hard the day is. So thank you for your question, and I think something along those lines will just say, "I'm proud of you."
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's all encompassing.
Yeah.
It's not but like, you did this, but it's just that ultimate acceptance of I'm proud of you and how you used each day and each moment.
That's it, Chris. It's how I use my hardships for good, how I use my downfalls for good, and with wonderful people along that journey.
Yeah.
So good question.
Well, thank you, man. That's what a full life is, though. You take the boxing analogy. You take the punches on the chin and you keep going, man.
That's it. Well, Chris, that's we're gonna leave with that. Chris
Oh, thank
brought
you, man.
a deep final question. Thank you. I love
Thank you
that
so much for
question.
having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, thank you for following on my journey. And Chris is, Chris has been a pivotal point in many art, and he is definitely a friend. And I know you got a lot from what he had to share. So stay tuned for more notes that really inspired me to share more. So, Chris, thank you. God bless you guys. Till
Awesome.
next time.
Thank you, everybody.